Good afternoon. I'm Flora Peyvandi from University of Milan, and it's a big pleasure for me to have three very expert speakers who share their experience in terms of the global distribution of gene therapy. We try to focus on what is the organization right now in terms of treatment, dosing, and follow-up of patients with hemophilia who are going through the gene therapy. And also, we try to show you what are the differences between Europe and United States. Before starting, we want to ask you, please, to invite you to complete the following very short survey, which could help us in the planning of our future webinars. And please remember to just scan and go through this survey. With this one, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Wolfgang Miesbach from University of Frankfurt. And Wolfgang has a large experience in terms of clinical trial and management of the patient with the gene therapy, and is also the chair of the gene therapy group at EAHAD. Wolfgang, is yours.
Thank you very much, Flora, for this nice introduction, and also thank you very much for the invitation to present this topic. It's about the administration of gene therapy and how the hub-and-spoke model could be modified if it is used in certain areas globally. So here are my disclosures. And to start with the structure and also some characteristics of hemophilia centers in Europe, according to the EAHAD website. So the EAHAD is a European Hemophilia Surveillance system where all the adverse events will be noted and also will be shared with the community. Up to now, we have more than 400 hemophilia centers, and there's a great variability. There are very big centers, but also very small centers, and also the facilities offered in the hemophilia centers differ. There is not only a variability in the centers, but also in the countries. There are countries with a huge number of hemophilia centers, and there are some countries with a very small number. In addition to this, there is no generally accepted definition. Also, EAHAD is doing a great body of work in certification and accreditation of hemophilia centers, and there are different names for this. Now, today we speak about gene therapy for hemophilia, and so far, the most patients have been treated within clinical trials. So up to 400 patients have been included in different phase 1 to phase 3 trials for hemophilia. And of course, in clinical trials, there is a strict regulation by the regulatory bodies, by the sponsors. So the site selection will be predefined, also controlled. There is a certain reimbursement, a standardized form for patient selection and informed consent, also standardized follow-up regarding laboratory investigation and how safety events could be managed. Finally, all the data management will be done with the monitors and supervised by the sponsors. Now, after the approval of the first 3 gene therapies worldwide, the responsibility switched to the hemophilia centers. And this includes the patient information and extensive education. Part of this also is done by scientific organizations such as EAHAD. The administration of gene therapy construct and management of possible infusion-related reaction, as well as the management of short-term adverse events such as ALT elevation, is monitored and managed by the hemophilia centers, as well as a determination of factor levels and to make the decision when the pre-existing factor replacement or Hemlibra treatment could be stopped or tapered. All is done in close cooperation between the different team members and also within an interdisciplinary frame, including hepatologists and immunologists. There would be needed, and this is common sense, a long-term observation, probably a lifelong observation in data, in registries and data collection. And what is also a problem and is different to the situation in clinical trials is that the reimbursement is a challenge, and this is what we recently have experienced, at least in Germany. Now, what are the different roles for hemophilia centers after approval in gene therapy? Some of these roles can be fulfilled by one center alone, but for the most roles, the cooperation between different hemophilia centers is needed. And therefore, it should be decided upfront which center is responsible for the patient at what stage of gene therapy. For this is needed how to define dosing centers. So what are qualification criteria that a center can do dosing and can become a dosing center? Who would be responsible for the probably more important, even more important part, the follow-up care and guidance, what to do if there would be some safety events. And even should the patient be transferred between centers during follow-up should be decided, and who is doing the decision regarding to laboratory results and the occurrence of safety events. Now, for this, the EAHAD, together with the European Haemophilia Consortium, the European Patient Organization, proposed a model called hub and spoke model. And with this model, the responsibilities between the different centers are clearly defined. And this should make it possible for every patient who would be interested in gene therapy, who would fulfill all the inclusion criteria to become treated with gene therapy independent of the center size, the experience of the center with gene therapy, and the availability of specific consultants. And this could be done by the definition of national hub centers, and the hub centers would be responsible for the prescription and management of the administration of gene therapy, and the spoke centers who very close cooperate with the hub centers and are doing the work pre-gene therapy administration and the very important post-follow-up period. For all of this, a huge degree of communication, cooperation is needed, and there are also some standards that should be defined upfront. Now, it was now our aim to investigate not only in different countries in Europe, but also globally, if this model of cooperation between different centers related to the experience they have so far in gene therapy would also work. And for this, a survey has been sent to different centers, and it was now able to become published in Hemophilia, and it could be read by open access. So, and for this, the survey has been sent to 10 European countries: Belgium, Croatia, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, the Netherlands, Poland, Turkey, and the UK, but also to 10 non-European countries, such as Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, India, Japan, Nepal, South Africa, Thailand, and the USA. And in the survey, several questions have been asked. First of all, are there country-specific models and standards for hemophilia care in general? Do these standards include the collaboration with other disciplines such as hepatologists or immunologists? Then directed to gene therapy, are there already predefined criteria for the management of gene therapy of hemophilia? Then a question about the number of potential hemophilia centers who could offer gene therapy. So would each hemophilia center administer gene therapy, and would each hemophilia offer the follow-up of gene therapy? And finally, could a distribution of the different steps of gene therapy between hemophilia centers be useful? Would the hub-and-spoke model be useful? Should be done some modifications of the hub-and-spoke model? And most important, in case of adverse events, who would be responsible for the management, the time very close after the treatment, and who would be responsible more than 6 months after treatment? And these are the results of the survey. Thank you very much. It could be shown, as expected, that there is a significant regional difference in the number of hemophilia centers, ranging from more than 250 in India to 4 in Croatia. 13 countries reported having country-specific models and standards for hemophilia care. The majority of countries, 6 out of 10, required selective establishment of gene therapy centers, and this, of course, is an ongoing process. Only 4 countries, or the representatives of 4 countries mentioned that gene therapy could be administered in each hemophilia centers, and 12 representatives of the different countries mentioned that the follow-up can be carried out by each center. And there was an agreement between the survey participants in most countries, the distribution of the different steps of gene therapy between centers would be useful. So the next slide, please. And what is interesting when it comes to the management of adverse events, there is an agreement that the initial management of adverse events should primarily be done by the hub center or in collaboration between the hub and the spoke centers. But after a certain time, so after 6 months, the responsibilities to manage potential adverse events shift to include the spoke centers. And this once more emphasizes the need for the ongoing collaboration between the different centers. So to conclude, the survey underscores the critical role of collaboration among hemophilia centers and healthcare providers in adopting gene therapy. There's a clear need for establishing criteria for gene therapy centers, and this is also a process EAHAD now want to focus on, and for fostering local and international guidelines. This survey highlights the varying approaches to managing adverse events, also reflecting the diverse healthcare landscapes. And the findings advocate for the hub-and-spoke model as a flexible and effective approach to improve hemophilia treatment and care globally. Thank you so much for your attention so far. And now I'm looking very much forward to real-world experiences in gene therapy in hemophilia given by Robert Klamroth.
Yeah, thank you, Wolfgang, for this nice presentation. And Germany is a good start or a good example for the hub and spoke model. Here first my disclosures, more or less the same like Wolfgang's and the other speakers. And this is a very nice publication where you can see that in the hub and spoke model, communication is key. communication between the hub and spoke model, between patients and doctors. There are challenges, but it's always a lot of discussion. And in Germany, the hub and spoke model is well received because there's already a duality of hemophilia treatment centers. So we have hemophilia comprehensive care centers that are usually the hub centers, and we have hemophilia treatment centers, which are more like the local centers and the spoke centers. And I would like to describe with my patients who I treated with gene therapy, how the way is. So Roctavian, you all know, is approved since September 2022 in the European Union, Hemgenix since February 2023, and in Germany, we wanted equal opportunity to access gene therapy for all our patients. So there's a lot of awareness and information. And that's the reason that in smaller centers, if the doctors are interested in gene therapy, they offer it to their patients in collaboration with the hub center. And the problem is in Germany that gene therapy is highly regulated. I don't know how it will be in other countries, but in Germany, we have a special guideline, the Advanced Therapy Medicinal Products Guideline, ATMP, and this requires very detailed what you need to be a hub center. And to make it easy, it's usually the Hemophilia Comprehensive Care Center, and what requires to be a spoke center, which at least have to be a hemophilia treatment center. They are officially published in March 2024, and we all have to apply now to get permission. And it's very likely that the big hemophilia comprehensive care centers will get permission to do or to continue to do gene therapy. What I think is crucial is that there is a dual information and consent center. So the first information is at the spoke center, and if its patient is eligible, and it depends on the experience of the spoke center. In the spoke centers I collaborate with, the AAV5 test is done already in the spoke center, and the evaluation of liver health, and the patient comes to me with the results of AAV5, negative of course for hemophilia A, and evaluation by the hepatologist that the liver has no fibrosis. And then we have a second informational discussion about advantages, disadvantages, and about the procedure. Generally, it's an outpatient treatment. We need an outpatient pharmacy. That might be different in other countries too. It's in Germany a little bit demanding because these outpatient pharmacies had previously no contact to gene therapy at all. And the ATMP guidelines require standard operating procedures for the management of complications during and after infusions. That's just as an introduction. And I will now share with you the first experience of 2 patients who are dosed with the licensed product. The first patient is a hub and spoke patient because he's originally treated in Magdeburg by my colleague, Dr. Bönig. He was on prophylactic treatment with extended half-life factor 8 3 times a week. They had occasional traumatic bleeds with this treatment, joint disease, got an ankle prosthesis in 2019, and he was referred to us to discuss gene therapy. He was suitable, eligible, and he had a realistic expectation of gene therapy, and that's the reason I said, okay, we will go for the next step and ask his insurance companies for permission. That's especially in Germany, we still need a second evaluation and permission of the insurance companies, which is quite time consuming and depends. And I cannot explain the German system in this short time because we have so many different insurance companies, but it depends on the insurance companies if gene therapy is immediately funded or needs a lot of negotiation. Patient 2 was our patient. The beginning was exactly the same, so we needed a discussion. He was treated with imicizumab before gene therapy, and the reason that in the end the insurance companies was convinced that despite the treatment with imicizumab, he had an ABR with bleedings in his left elbows. Both patients were dosed. The first patients in end of August last year, and the second patient in the beginning of November last year. Just from the handling is both patients arrived in the morning in the hemophilia treatment center, and then after the arrival, the safe arrival, the pharmacy started preparation of gene therapy. You all know it's still quite expensive, and there was a certain, we were a little bit anxious. because especially it is a patient from Magdeburg, that he will not arrive on time or there will be an accident. And so we waited with the preparation until was here. That wasn't the first patient because the pharmacy had a lot of guidance from the company, still a little bit difficult. And so we started the infusion in the afternoon. In the second patient, we were better prepared. The pharmacy was better prepared. And we started after the preparation at 12:30. This is the first patient. Yeah, I got the permission of it. It's the first patient treated with a licensed product from Magdeburg with my study nurse and my study doctor, who are still involved in gene therapy. And you can see all were quite happy. And the infusion went without any side effects. So there's a protocol of the infusion procedure. You adapt the infusion rate. So if there are no side effects, you can go for a faster infusion rate. Both patients had exactly 2 hours of infusion of Roctavian. There were no complications, and both patients left the hospital 30 minutes after the end of the infusion and reported to us in the next day. The patient from Magdeburg stayed in Berlin and came in the next morning. He was in the hotel across the street and came back to us and reported about his experience. So the key points for the infusion day, at least in Germany, and it might be the same in other countries. The close collaboration with the pharmacy is important because for us, the pharmacy is different as an outpatient treatment from the usual hospital pharmacy, at least for Roctavian. CSL plans a different way, and there might be the possibility to use the hospital pharmacy. So logistics of the gene therapeutic product are important. You need an infusion protocol and you need standard operating procedures, which we already developed for Germany in our gene therapy group of GTH. And of course, you have to inform the patient, should she stop prophylaxis, how she should go on after the treatment. So if you look for the first follow-up in both patients, there were no adverse reactions in the day after infusion. He stopped factor VIII replacement treatment after 3 weeks. We have now a follow-up for 7 months. He had no bleed at all, and I will show you how factor VIII and the liver behaved in the next slide. Patient 2 had signs of a viral infection 2 days after infusion for nearly 7 days. He was 2 days off from work. I'm not sure that it was a causal relation, but at least it was a relation in the timing. And he had more like a common flu, but I cannot exclude that the gene therapy had something to do with it. At least he felt, yeah, like a viral infection for 7 days and couldn't go to work for 2 days. He stopped imicizumab 1 day before the infusion of gene therapy. Follow-up now is 5 months, 0 bleeds. And if we look now how the liver reacted, in the first patient, we had an ALT/AST elevation after 6 weeks. We started immunosuppression with prednisolone as a recommended dose with 60 milligram and had a reduction over 6 weeks. Patient 2 had no significant rise in LAT. In Germany, we have a program which is developed under the help of the German Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis, which is called GENS. And there we documented our patients. And you can see here patient 1, and you can see the orange lines at the top. They are the ALT and AST, so the liver enzymes. And you can see if we stay here at this side that there was a rise after 6 weeks. We started with prednisolone, liver enzymes went down. After stopping prednisolone, they went a little bit up again. But if you look now at the blue curves is factor VIII. Dark blue is one-stage clotting assay. Light blue is the chromogenic assay. And you can see with the prednisolone, we had a rise in factor VIII, which continued when he had the second rise in LAT, and that was the reason that we did not introduce prednisolone again. He has now a factor VIII level between 30 and 40%. No bleeding, he's quite content, and the LAT normalized. So that is the first patient. Important for the hub and spoke ideas that we got the blood draws were done in Magdeburg at the Spock Center, but we got immediately on the day of the blood draws the results from the laboratory in Magdeburg, and we had a very close communication every week how to proceed and what to do. And we still continue, even if it's now in the 7 months, we continue the exchange of laboratory values. And my last phone call with the patient was 4 weeks ago, and he's still quite happy with the treatment and had so far no additional replacement therapy. The second patient is quite different. And first of all, you can see there was the orange curve again. So the liver enzymes are very flat. There was no rise in transaminase. If you look now, this dark blue is the Wunsch clotting assay, and you can estimate, of course, that this emicizumab, which is still present in the patient after gene therapy. And if you look at the chromogenic assay, you can see here the rise of the chromogenic assay, and he was completely different because his last level of the chromogenic assay of factor VIII was 400%. So it was a little bit the other way around. He is but 35. He has no overweight. He has no evident thrombotic risk factors, but we still have the discussion: is it safe to withhold anticoagulation? Should we do it only in risk situations? But he is doing at the moment fine. There were no signs of venous thrombosis. Of course, he has no bleeding at all. So the conclusion is that gene therapy is possible in the German system. The hub and spoke model is possible. I think collaboration is key with the patient help program, the patient support program, to do blood draws at the working space. So for the patient from Magdeburg, it's done at the working space. So it's very easy and convenient. And if you have the electronic communication between centers like we developed with our GENS program, that's how we called it, I think we have on real time the exchange between the hub and spoke model. And I'm pretty convinced that in Germany, the hub and spoke model will work quite well, quite different from what Amy told us. That in the US, it's not possible due to the structural differences.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope to see many of you at the WFH meeting this weekend. Here are my disclosures. So my task was to describe how the United States hemophilia care is organized as it relates to gene therapy. So the way it's organized is we have what is called a National Hemophilia Program Coordinating Center. For many years now, that coordinating center has been the American Thrombosis and Hemostasis Network, or ATHN. So ATHN was chosen by HRSA, which is the Health Resources and Service Administration of the government. And then once this program coordinating center is chosen, that center is responsible for the HTCs that are within the United States. And there are currently 149. That number kind of goes up and down over time. You can see here the map of the United States, and you can see where the HTCs are located, mainly along the coastal regions where the population of the United States is much higher. I want to point out the central part of the country where there is, in many cases, no hemophilia treatment center. This coincides, unfortunately, with the most mountainous areas of the United States as well, which makes travel to treatment centers outside of that region a little bit more challenging. Within the United States, then, we have these 149 treatment centers. They are broken into regions, and there are 10 regions depicted here in different colors. I'm going to point out my region. I'm here. I'm in Ohio, so Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio is the Great Lakes region, and our region has a regional core center. So each of those 8 regions has a regional core center. Those are funded through the HRSA, so the money comes from the government to ATHN, from ATHN to the regional core centers. And the regional core centers are responsible basically for making sure that all of the treatment centers in their region are doing what they're supposed to do. So what is ATHN doing to help get the United States organized as it relates to gene therapy? Firstly, we have a national data set that is called Clinical Manager. So every HTC imports their data into this data set. And then within ATHN, we also have Study Manager. So that is where different clinical trials, whether they be observational or treatment, are housed. So the section of ATHN, the Study Manager that contains gene therapy information, is something called ATHN Transcends. So within ATHN Transcends, there are gene therapy follow-up modules Those modules, that information will feed into the World Federation of Hemophilia Gene Therapy Registry as well. So that will be hopefully a seamless process of information transfer. And we are currently working on a tumor identification and evaluation plan for patients that undergo gene therapy as well. So this is what Athens Transcends looks like. You'll see across the top, there are a series of cohorts of patients that can be enrolled. So once a patient enrolls into the hemophilia cohort, then they can participate in different types of projects. So you can see here, they can enroll in the hemophilia natural history arm, which just is what it sounds like, the natural history of hemophilia. So it's an observational trial, not interventional. And then you can also participate in the gene therapies outcome arm. So this currently would mainly be patients that have had drug delivered during clinical trials. There is also going to be modules for each of the commercial products that are available. So here I'm highlighting Hemgenix. Hemgenix was approved first in the United States, with Roctavian being approved second. So the Hemgenix module is up and ready for patients to enroll. There will be a Roctavian module that I believe is almost ready to enroll patients. And then as soon as Becfez is approved, which is, I believe, imminent in the United States, there will be another module for that drug as well. So this is where we get to a slightly more sticky situation, because up until now we've sounded really organized. So how is dosing structured in the United States? Wolfgang spoke very elegantly about the hub and spoke model in Germany, as did Robert. Unfortunately, this model does not exist in the United States. So any center, and it doesn't have to be a hemophilia treatment center, can potentially dose and follow patients that have had gene therapy for their hemophilia. So is that a good idea? I can tell you my opinion. My opinion is, of course, that is not a good idea. The National Bleeding Disorder Foundation actually asked our Food and Drug Administration, the equivalent of the EMA, for a program similar to what it sounds like Robert was describing, a REMS program that would have certain restrictions on who could dose gene therapy, and the FDA declined. So that was really the only mechanism that exists to restrict gene therapy in the United States. So there currently is no restriction whatsoever. So what is actually happening in practice? There are efforts from the companies that have have created these products to have at least a minimum standard of education for each center to be able to be designated as a dosing center. But again, this is coming from the companies, so coming from CSL and coming from BioMarin. It is not coming from any other organizational body or government body. So right now once you have completed the educational program, there are no other requirements to dose except following, of course, your institutional rules. In the United States, we have about 20 centers that have completed training for Roctavian, with another 21 that are expected by mid-year. CSL is slightly further ahead. As I said, Hemgenix was approved first in the United States, so they have 45 centers that are trained to deliver. In terms of individual HTCs or hospital plans, there is no universally accepted approach to gene therapy. Just by correspondence with different regions, most are writing their own standard operational procedures. Some regions are working a little bit more closely than others on what those SOPs should include. And there are multiple approaches to contracting and billing. It sounds like Robert has some issues in that regard as well. We have different insurance practices in the United States, and we also have a unique program called 340V, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So the concept that has got some traction in the United States is having dosing centers and follow-up centers. That's quite similar, I think, to the hub and spoke model However, this language seems a little bit more politically acceptable to the HTCs in the United States because every HTC in the United States sort of thinks of themselves as being quite equal one to another. Although I think if you actually looked at the centers, you would see that their capabilities are quite different. So right now we're calling ourselves dosing centers and follow-up centers. The Medical and Safety Advisory Council to the National Bleeding Disorder Foundation, which is previously known as the National Haemophilia Foundation in the United States, did come out with recommendations on what your treatment centers should be doing in terms of being prepared to deliver gene therapy. So that guidance has 5 different components. We want to make sure people have the education and institutional training that is required. They need to have thoughtful patient eligibility criteria. There's some guidance on insurance authorization and support, procurement, administration, and then monitoring and follow-up. We also have a stance on shared decision-making. We're just waiting for the final sign-off on the National Bleeding Disorder Foundation board for this to be published to our website. But that is a resolution that MASAC believes that shared decision-making processes should be used when considering the gene therapy process. And we highlight that the World Federation of Hemophilia shared decision-making tool is a useful tool when thinking about gene therapy. So what are the individual centers doing currently? Well, individual centers are doing whatever they want currently. So I think some centers have quite rigid criteria for determining eligibility. Some don't. I think that those centers that participated in the gene therapy trials, by dint of having that experience, are much more savvy in eligibility and probably have already come up with a plan for who is your hepatologist, who is your genetic counselor, who are your support systems, who is your pharmacist, and that sort of thing. We are trying to share this information across the regions, but as I said, there is no set process in place. It's also very important to make sure that there is communication between centers if a patient is going to be referred. So very similar to what Robert said, there needs to be communication about who is doing what and when they are doing it, particularly as in regard to when a patient would return to their follow-up center. I have heard some people in the US saying as soon as they have dosed a patient, they are sending the patient right back to the referral center. Some people have said, I would feel more comfortable waiting till after the completion of the steroid wean. Some people have said, no, we're going to just set a time and say it's going to be 6 months and then patients are going to be sent back. So this is really going to be very individual communication between dosing and referral centers. There also has to be communication about when to stop prophylaxis. There needs to be a plan to be able to get this swift laboratory follow-up that is required to adjust steroids if necessary. It's very different than a clinical trial where, you know, on our clinical trial patients, of course, the email would pop into my inbox every morning. Here are the lab results. The study coordinator would be knocking on my door. Have you seen the labs? What do we need to do? In clinical care, that process doesn't exist with that. So I think each center is doing slightly different things in regard to making sure there is someone that is responsible every single day for getting these labs and following up on them. There's also needs to be a conversation between centers about who is going to be entering patients into these registries. Is it the dosing center? Is it the referral center? And then who is responsible for reporting things like adverse events? So communication is really going to be the key. We have certain challenges in the United States as related to gene therapy. The biggest one, I think, is something called the 340B program. I'll be talking a little bit more about that in subsequent slides. There's certainly a potential for inequitable distribution in the United States. I showed you that some states have no hemophilia treatment center at all. Some have only one, and it's located, you know, on one very far end of the state. And it's important to note that many patients, around 40 to 60% of patients, depending on your state, have state-based insurance. State-based insurance in the United States does not cross state lines. So you cannot go to another state and get something like gene therapy, particularly because of the expense, without significant work with your state-based insurance to cover this very expensive therapy in a different state. So that's a really big issue when it comes to distribution in the United States. The other issue is the follow-up time is really consuming and costly to patients because it's not included in the cost of the drug itself. And many of our patients travel from far distances to come to treatment centers, and travel is a little bit more challenging in a country the size of the United States, depending on where your patients live. So for example, if you're in Montana, they don't have a hemophilia treatment center, they would need to get to Denver, which in Colorado, which is the closest hemophilia treatment center, but that's across, the Rocky Mountains. So driving is nearly impossible, particularly if it's the winter time. So that patient is going to have to fly back and forth for their follow-up. One good thing from COVID is we're much more savvy in doing telemedicine these days, which I think has helped greatly. But it's important to know that laboratory monitoring is very different depending on where you get those labs done. So there's another step. If someone's getting their labs done in 2 different locations, you really need to understand how those labs correlate with each other, if they correlate with each other. There's, I think, potential for dosing the wrong patient, or patients not having the right follow-up if people decide to dose patients that don't have a lot of experience with the ins and outs of gene therapy. I think there's also potential for discord between dosing and referral centers unless that communication between the centers is really on point. And then there's also this concern about which center is responsible for registry input. As I described the Athens system, you have to have the whole Athens system up and running, the database, and then there's a separate contract for every single module within that study manager that I was describing. So having those contracts and having a data entry person and all of that is required to put that information in is also something that is inequitable in the United States. Smaller treatment centers often have fewer resources. So having someone to do that contracting and data entry might not be possible in some of the referral centers either. So I think, again, close communication about who is doing and who can do this very important follow-up data entry. Just a few words about the 340B program. I think many of you have heard at least tangentially about this. This is a federal program in the United States. It allows hemophilia treatment centers and other certain covered entities to sell products to their patients at a discounted price. And by law, then, those profits have to go back into the clinical care of patients. Most United States hemophilia treatment centers get the majority of the funds to run their treatment centers through this mechanism. However, certain hospitals also have 340B programs that are not related to your hemophilia treatment center. That includes almost every single children's hospital in the United States or any hospital that works in an area where there's a large number of uninsured or poorly insured patients. So for example, in my center, we have a hemophilia center H340B program, and we have a hospital 340B program. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen between those two sort of competing entities about who is going to purchase this drug and where the profits of this drug go back to. So which 340B designation do you use? It's different in every location. We have tried to be as organized as possible about this using something called the Hemophilia Alliance, which is a group purchasing organization in the United States of hemophilia treatment centers. So some HTCs are able to use their 340B program. Some institutions are requiring use of the hospital 340B program. And then there's a lot more negotiation of where that profit goes. it isn't necessarily directed back into your hemophilia coffers. So, and an additional wrinkle is we have not found a mechanism to allow a referral center to purchase the drug and then send that drug to a dosing center so that the profits go back to the referral center. So there's a disincentive because of that mechanism for referral centers to want to send their patients anywhere else. So there's an incentive for each treatment center to want to dose themselves. In conclusion, the hub and spoke model really does not currently exist in the United States. There are regions that are working collaboratively to make sure patients have access and that things are done properly, but there is no strict organizational structure. So each region is doing things slightly differently. So there do remain some potential challenges and opportunities. But my hope is that using guidance from organizations like MESAC, the World Federation, EAHAD, we can really all work together to make sure that we are evolving this process in the way that makes sure that patients get the best care from the people who are most well-trained in these drugs that, you know, they're all still relatively new, right? So we only know what we know so far, and I think we have a lot to learn. And I'm gonna just finish with communication is really the key to all of this, and I hope that communication and collaboration will be the theme moving forward for treatment centers across the country as the therapies evolve for our patients. So thank you very much, and really happy to be here today.
Thank you very much, Amy. And I'm having a few questions for you, for all of you. First, I'm going to start, please, with the short answers because we have very, few minutes. But for Amy, there is a question for you. What are the expectations in the US that manufacturers help with patients' assistance with the home care, lab assistance, or traveling? Is anything existing like that in the States?
So there are some patient assistance programs from each of the companies that can allow for home nursing, for example. But there are also sort of restrictions on what they can provide to the patients. So for example, I have a patient who was dosed a couple of weeks ago. The patient's partner was deployed to a different state in the United States he works in insurance, and there was a weather disaster. So he's going to be gone for weeks, and he has state-based insurance. So we reached out to the company, can you help us with this particular patient? Because his insurance will not pay for labs out of state. And we have not been able to overcome that hurdle yet. So I think there are some limitations in the US to what patient assistance programs can do. And they certainly cannot provide things like extra days off work for the patients, which is, a really big challenge. These are adult patients, right? They have lives, they have jobs. And so, I think we all have to be just really, really thoughtful about making sure this follow-up is as easy as possible for the patients and as, try to tap every resource that we have to make sure they get what they need.
Thank you, Amy. There's a question for Robert for ALT increase, and Vincenzo is asking you whether there is a room for wait-and-see approach before starting steroids after first ALT rise, and it seems that you waited some days before starting the steroid in patient number 1. If there was any kind of national guideline or it was a physician decision.
There's no national guideline. It was my own decision, and we wanted to confirm that there's a rise in liver enzymes, and that's the reason that it was very well spotted by Vincenzo that we waited a bit. Our internal policy is that I personally think I would start steroids only if there is an enzyme rise above the upper limit of normal. I'm not going with a study where you have this 1.5 rise to the first LAT before starting the process. I'm personally more convinced that you have in the patients who have a real immune response to the drug, they have a higher ALT rise. And that was the reason we started a little bit later to confirm that there was a real rise.
Thank you, Robert. I think you are making very happy Vincenzo with this answer. And Wolfgang, I have a question for you because what Amy was just reporting today, it was very important for us. Fortunately, in Europe, seems that we are organized with a hub and spoke, and Robert showed this, the system, which is very similar to what we have in Milan, and we dosed the patient 2 weeks ago in Milan, and it's very, very similar at the European level. But what is happening in the States with those centers that not necessarily have enough maybe experience in terms of hemophilia and management of hemophilia? So about the safety issue, and we are talking so much at the different organizations, how we have to evaluate the safety. What do you think we have to do as the EAHAD, ISTH in the future to follow the safety of the gene therapy without and hub and spoke model in the States?
Yes, thank you very much, Flora. This is really a crucial question for the US, but also for Europe and other parts of the world. So first of all, I was surprised that I think there are some maybe more similarities between the administration of administration of gene therapy in the US and Europe than I thought before. Of course, there are some limitations, structural differences, reimbursement problems. But Amy pointed out that every center would do what it wants, but cooperation, also communication, is the key. And this is not unsimilar to the hub and spoke center, where the hub center, of course, will do the administration, but there is a high grade of communication, and the different responsibilities are not predefined. They will be predefined for each individual patient and for the centers collaborating to this process. And in addition to this, there already is a qualification process ongoing in the United States, performed so far by the industry, but I think this is also a great progress, and this is something we are still now wanting to organize in Europe. But regarding your question, Flora, about the safety, I think there should be some mandatory data collections and into registries to collect every single adverse event, and it should be made clear that these events collected on a national basis should also lead to a rapid management and publication of these cases.
Thanks. This is very important, and I think from both, I want to ask you, Amy and Robert, is this happening? Are your patients who have been dosed are followed nationally and internationally in a database? And if yes, which database you think in the future should collect this information and how the information should be distributed? Let's start with Amy.
So I think in the United States, those patients, that data should go into the AFN gene therapy follow-up module. And then that will seamlessly transition to the WFH GTR as well. And the WFH GTR steering committee, I know, is working very hard on making sure that that data is evaluated as quickly as possible, and that there's a communication process as well. So I think it will be really close collaboration between AFN and WFH GTR.
Thank you. And Robert, how is it in Germany?
Well, in Germany, it's mandatory to give this data in the registry. That's so from the theoretical side, it's perfect. But from the practical side, so it's not really set up at the moment. So it's going in the German hemophilia registry, but we don't have at the moment the possibility to put in all items. But we are very optimistic to start in summer, hopefully.
Excellent. So for EAHAD of next year, we need to understand how many patients have been treated and what are the safety efficacy, as you showed in all Europe. So Wolfgang, any idea of how we are going? We said we're going to have a session in the EAHAD meeting next year, and it would be nice to have a plan of reporting all the data. How are we going to do it? at European level?
Yes, I think one possibility would be, because now one of the recent activities and achievement of EAHAD was the EAHAD gene therapy database. So this is a possibility to have an overview about the recently published cases and also recently reports on gene therapy. And with this gene therapy database, this is publicly available on the EAHAD website. There's also a dashboard with the characteristics, but also with a focus on the safety events, and this will be updated every 3 months. So at least there would be a possibility to get a timely information.
Thank you, because that would be a good start. Robert, I have a question for you regarding the assay. Your patient, if I'm not wrong, number 2 was on emicizumab, and I believe that you were managing the situation with the chromogenic bovine assay to see how was the situation. And then the treatment with the gene therapy, fortunately with chromogenic as well. How you were managing the assay results and interpretation, especially because 300, 400, I'm sure you were at the beginning a little bit worried whether this is real or this is an in vitro data.
Yeah, so I think you know, like you, we have a lot of experience with the bovine assay, chromogenic assay for factor VIII, and we see it very well working. If you do surgery in patients with emicizumab, you can measure the real factor VIII. We were a little bit astonished how high in this patient there is this overshoot of factor VIII production. And you can imagine that if it's in chromogenic assay 400%, it might be in the one-stage clotting assay 600 or even higher. So we were a little bit concerned about this thrombotic risk in this patient, but so far he's doing quite well. I have to admit, at some point we measured D-dimer. First time it was very well. Second time it was a little bit elevated. Of course, you get a little bit concerned at this point. So we did an ultrasound, but there was no thrombotic event, and he's doing quite well. But of course, I think that's a problem. It's not only if patients are disappointed because they have not enough expression. With this high expression, you can run in other troubles.
Yeah, these are the real reason why the importance of hub center is coming out, because everybody should know that the gene therapy is not only infusion of a concentrate, is an important, complicated type of treatment, and the center who is doing the dosing should have enough knowledge of management of any eventual type of side effect or additional effect. I think this is very, very important. I think demonstration of how a center like you knows the assay, knows the interpretation of assay, and eventually if there is a need of anticoagulant, could think about in the future. I would have millions of questions, and Amy, I think you have last question you want to do?
Yeah, so Robert, I think, I had a patient very similar in the clinical trials with quite high expression. And I think this is another important point of communication and collaboration. We need to figure out these patients that do get these very high levels. I think we need to really put some thought behind why and what do we do. So having these registries and having them talk to each other is important to figure things like this out as well.
Yeah. That's a very good point, Amy. And that's the reason I think at European and in US, there should be a kind of working group with those centers that are enrolling, treating the patient and understanding what are the results that are getting. So with this one, I think we already reached 1 hour webinar. Thank you very much to all 3 speakers. You did an amazing job with a very short time. And thank you very much to Juliana and to Angelus from the EAHAD. And EAHAD continue to update you about what is the situation of the gene therapy. And thank you, all of you, for participating. And please remember, scan the QR code and check the EAHAD gene therapy trial database. And also try to work on the survey and update us what you really need for the future webinars. With this one, thank you very much and have a great evening. Bye.